Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD daily, not a daily creative challenge, Adobe XD Masterclass. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. We've made it through another week. If you are here tuning in live on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. If you're on Twitter, hello over there. I can't see chat, but if you do want to chat along, head on over to behance.net/Adobe Live. I got my second vaccine this morning. Feeling good so far, but I've heard that 12 hours, almost to the T, from the shot, that's when side effects hit. But it's all for a good cause, right? Hopefully we'll be on a better path forward after all of this. But a big hello to Laura and Umacorn and Brett and Cody and Wade, Ruth. Who else do we have in here? Anita and Tatiana, Antonio, Katya, Kara. Great to see all of you. Happy Friday indeed. Happy Friday from Hamilton. And I saw, I think, Anita from Toronto up there somewhere. Great to see all of you. All right, so Masterclass number 49. We've been at this for 49 weeks. Many of you have been joining me since week number 1, and I can't thank you enough. So we're going to go ahead and hop over to my screen, and we're going to get started. So if you missed the news, a new update came out last week, XD 39, and it introduced Gamepad, keys, and voice triggers for components. And as you can see here, I have a little bit of a video showing that you can create very immersive experiences on one single artboard using component states, your gamepads, which I have one right here. We're going to dive into that shortly. Keys, voice, and some of you have been doing some really cool stuff already with these new triggers. And like Jonathan Pimento mentioned on Twitter a few days ago, time triggers are also in the works. We have a lot coming for prototyping, not just prototyping, design as well, but prototyping, there's a lot of really fun stuff. I cannot wait to get my hands on some of that stuff. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD right over here, and we're gonna get going. So last week, we started the process of building out this TV experience, specifically for browsing media. And of course, many of you didn't know this at the time, but we were creating it specifically so we can add gamepads and keys and voice triggers the week after, which is today. Sneaky, isn't it? Umacorn saying, I don't have a gamepad though. Yeah, some people don't, so you can definitely use your keys or your voice. And if you do want to pick up, we do support, the Xbox, which there's so many different models, but the new ones, the Xbox One X, I believe it is. I don't know. There's so many models. Let me know in the chat. The new Xboxes and also the new PlayStation 5s, and of course the previous generation as well. All right, so we started the process last week of building this out, and today we're gonna add a few additional elements, and we're also gonna start adding some prototyping interactions. And I designed this in such a way that I really want to talk when the time comes about how all of this is laid out. Because with the ability to, have multiple gamepad and keys and voice interactions on a single artboard, you may start adding the same interactions, right? So we'll get to that, and it gets a little bit tricky, but once you get the hang of it, it makes a lot of sense. All right. So we do have this component here at the top, and as you can see inside of the layers panel, it's called series, and we started to build out a few states. So we have our default state, which looks like this, right? We have the two shows on the left and the right, and we also have this one state here that shows the show on the left, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dive into this component, and I want to, just for visual purposes, add a little bit of an indicator that you can swipe to the left or swipe to the right. So I'm going to zoom on in here, and I'm going to grab my good old ellipse tool and drag one out just like this. Now, of course, because we're going to be using our gamepads to navigate, we're not too concerned about what exactly this looks like. It's more there just to let you know that there's content on the left and the right. It's all part of the user experience. You're not going to be tapping on it, right? But you could, of course, if you send this to someone who doesn't have a gamepad, you can definitely do that. So we've got that looking pretty good. And styling wise, I'm going to set the border at, let's say, white. But for, let's try a background blur. Let's see what a background blur looks like. And then we can go ahead and drop the opacity of the border so it's nice and subtle. Somewhere in this area. We can also try black. That's kind of nice. There we go. And what we're also going to do is grab the good old pen tool, shortcut key P. I'm going to activate my square grid and just drag out a little arrow, just like that, and view, drag it on up just a touch, make sure it's centered. We're going to change the color to white. Let's go ahead and bump up the size. We're going to round out the corners, round out the caps, all that fun stuff. And visually, I'm going to just move it on over a touch. If you take a look, it's not bad. I might want to just drop the opacity a little bit. Hey Alex, hey Stuart, great to see you. That could work. Again, we're not going to be tapping on this, more of a visual indicator. It's nothing too special at the moment. I may probably tweak, maybe I'll add a little bit of blue in here, just so it matches some of the rest of our design, right? It'll do, pig, it'll do. It's not my favorite arrow in the world, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. All right, and if anyone has questions about Adobe XD or the latest update, can't talk too much about the future other than time triggers are in the works and coming later this year, per Jonathan Pimento. But if, throw it in the chat. I am taking a peek and I will do my best to answer. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and group these. I'll just call this arrow. And then if I zoom on out, I'm going to view, drag one over. I'm holding down Alt or Option, drag it on over, and I can also flip it, boop, just like that, and pop it into place. Now, even though we are not going to be tapping on this particular arrow, at least in this prototype, we can use these to wire up our interactions, which we'll get to in just a moment. So we have that looking pretty good. Check the chat very quickly. Just joined. Did I miss something interesting? Not yet. We haven't gotten to the fun stuff yet, but we will get there. So, as a reminder, we have our default state and we have our end of time state. And because we added this arrow over in our default state, it also added it to the additional state as well. But we also have this image here that we might want to navigate to. So I'm going to go ahead and create one more state. And this is going to be called Futura. And we're going to start making changes here. So I'm going to dive in here, make sure to select the individual objects, and we're going to view. I do have some guides that can help me out. Just like that. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to grab this state here, make it a little bit larger, pull it down a touch, maybe bring it up a little bit, right? So again, we've got our end of times, over default state, and we have Futura. Now I do want to grab this and move this over as well. This won't be seen, so I'm not too concerned about it. And move this over a touch. Bring this back. Bring the mask in. And that should do. All right. Now this one looks like I'm going to dive in here, just bring this in a little bit, and then just to make sure that we have nice consistency of all of our other states, right? Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna stick with 3. Of course, you can create as many of these cars as you want, and you'll be able to navigate between all of them. So now one more thing that we started to do last week, but we kind of rushed through it, so I deleted it, and we're going to start again. But we wanted to create an expanded state. So when someone uses their gamepad, presses A, for example, this specific show might expand to fill the entire screen. So what we're going to do is from our default state, we're going to press that plus button and we're going to create another new state. And this will be called Sans Expanded. And now with that created and active, we're going to dive in here. And we did use a mask, and someone last week asked, why did you use a mask instead of a group or a component? So we have a mask inside of the component, as you can see right over here to the left. And that is because inside of this mask, we have some additional elements down here at the bottom, these buttons, that we don't necessarily want displayed initially, but we do want displayed when this show expands. And we're going to add some additional information in there. So using a mask will help us, well, mask out much of that information. So I'm going to grab the mask and just enlarge it so it fills the entire screen. Bring that on up. And then I can grab the individual elements like the image, for example, and start tweaking this. Now, what you're going to notice is that we have some elements on top, and we're going to get to that in a moment. I'm going to show you how to deal with these specific categories, but we'll get there in a minute. I'm also going to grab these, move them off. And the beauty of auto animate and wiring up these interactions is when the transition happens, all of this will animate really nicely. I can grab the arrows, move those off. And then we have our buttons, which are behind these categories. I'll just move this up. Maybe I'll move this up a little bit as well. There we go. All right, so now we have our default state and we have our expanded state. And again, when we do get to the prototyping phase, we're gonna wire this up so that we can very easily cycle between. Now, one thing we have down here at the bottom are these categories. And what I want to happen is when this state is expanded, right, from default to expanded, these categories, I want them to move out of the way. And one thing we can do, we can just put these categories behind this series component. We could do that, right? But I want some sort of animation just to spice it up a little bit. So we have, let's see, how do you usually decide the grid layout settings? That, honestly, that comes down to a conversation between you and your developers. Sometimes designers have very particular rules on that. Sometimes developers have rules on that. So definitely talk with your developers to see what they prefer. I don't have any particular rules myself since I don't really design for development, but your developers might, so definitely talk with them. All right, so what we want to do instead is we might want these particular categories inside of our series component. That way we're able to actually control them when the interactions are taking place. Now, last week, what we did is we created hover effects for these ones down here. Now, since this is made for a TV experience, probably hover effects aren't really going to apply. We want to be able to control this with our Gamepad. So I'm going to go ahead and actually ungroup these, or you can place them into a larger component. But we're going to go ahead and just ungroup. I'm going to make sure to keep those. This is sci-fi. And then we're going to do this one, ungroup. There we go. And I'll just very quickly name these, and this one will be Explore. So what we're going to do now is, instead of doing each individual one as a component, we're going to create one large component. And this will help us out when we want to navigate, because when you're navigating, you're not going to see multiple of the active cards at once. So I'm going to select all three of these, and I'm going to create a component within the Properties Inspector. You can also do that directly in your assets. I'm going to name these categories. And now what we can do, we can create individual states for these. But once we do that, we're going to actually place this into our series. Now, one thing you might notice is if you had this inside of this component already, or you copy and paste it, it's going to go in as an instance. And that's because it's nested inside of a larger one. So many times I will set up the various states first outside of the component and then put it in. Henry's asking, how are you today? I'm good, Henry. I got my second shot this morning, so I'm feeling pretty good. Hopeful for the future. Hope you're doing well as well. All right, so we've got our categories, and I'm going to go ahead and press that plus button. I'm going to create a new state, and I'm going to call this one Sci-Fi. I'm going to dive in here, and we're going to grab that shadow that we created in the last stream and just pull this down a little bit. We may even want to grab these layers and just bring this on up just a touch, right? So we have our default state and we have our sci-fi state, right? And we can do the exact same thing for the rest. So this will be Explore, dive in here, grab these layers, bring it on up, grab the shadow, bring that on down. Look at that little shadow. It's a very subtle shadow, but it's really cool. And what we did, just in case you missed last stream, is instead of a typical shadow like you would see, we actually duplicated the image layer and then just gave it a little bit of an object blur and then experimented with the blend mode. So in this case, I set it to hard light and dropped the opacity to about 80%, and it gives this really nice feel to it. And then finally, we're going to do this one over here to the right, and this is lose yourself. Dive in, grab the layers, boop, and then shadow, drag this on down. There we go. All right, so we have our various states, right? We have our default state, sci-fi, explore, and lose yourself. And to start the process of wiring this up, and I'm doing this now because once I do place this inside of this larger component, it's going to turn into an instance, so I would have to pop it out anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop into prototype mode, and we're going to start by selecting the object. Now, typically, you would select the object you want to tap on. So I would dive in here, select Sci-Fi Thrillers, this card here, click on the handle, and then we can choose tap, for example, or hover possibly as well. But in this case, we want to use our keys and we want to use our gamepad. The beauty of this is you can use any layer. So I can even use this layer here to navigate to this one. Doesn't make much sense, but you can do that, right? Could you have ambient music playing in the background while the prototype was running? So there are what's it called? There are audio playback. I don't believe it can go in the background, but there are definitely audio playback. Let's see. So if you do, yeah, so there's no time triggers, right? On individual components, but there are time triggers on artboards, right? So you can do that, and then you can choose, let's say, audio playback. Now, the good question, because I don't know if I've tested this lately, will that continue to play as you are navigating through the various components and the states? Good question. I'll have to test that out. All right, so back over here, what we're going to do is we're going to select this card, we're going to click on the handle, and then over within the Properties Inspector, we can now choose Voice, Keys and Gamepad, and of course, you can choose Hover, Tap, and all that fun stuff. Drag, not yet. Time at some point in the future. So we're going to choose that, and I could use my keys on my keyboard, but I also have my Xbox controller. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. It is connected via Bluetooth, and now looks like there's a software update. That's fine. Now I can just go ahead and just use the thumbstick or the A button, all that fun stuff, just to navigate, and you can see that going on right here. So in this case, when we're on this main screen, we essentially want to go down to get to this first state. So I'm going to go ahead and use the left thumbstick and navigate down. And we're going to use auto animate because we do want that to animate, and we're going to choose our sci-fi state. Now we don't want anything too crazy with these animations, very simple. Let's say 0.2 seconds should work. And if we play this and use the down, it just navigates, right? Very simple stuff. So now what we want to do is go to our sci-fi state and then select the second one. And now this one, we want the same settings, but instead we want to use that left thumbstick to go to the right, just like that. And we want to choose our explore state. And now we're going to go to explore. Click on this one, navigate to the right, make sure we have lose yourself, but we also want to be able to go back. So we're going to go to our Sci-Fi Thrillers card, go to the left, and then we'll choose our sci-fi state. And then finally, we can go to our lose yourself state, and this will be to the left because we're going to go back. Right, there we go. And we could also, if we want to do a nice circle, we could go to the sci-fi thriller state, and this one we'll actually want to navigate to the right, because if you go right, it'll go back to the beginning. So we're going to go right, and then sci-fi. Right? There we go. So now, if we go to our default state, we press play, we can now use the down thumbstick, or the left thumbstick go down, and then to the right, and we can just continue the cycle, right? Look at that. All right. So now that that's done, what we want to do, like I mentioned earlier, is take this categories component and place it inside of this series component so we can actually push it out of the way as the interactions are taking place. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard. I'm going to hop in here, and I'm simply going to paste it. Just like that, right? There we go. Okay, I'm just going to check for comments and questions. Perfect. So now that it's inside of this particular component, you're going to notice it also got added to our states as well, because we added it into our default state. So now we can dive in here and just move it out of the way inside of our expanded state, right? Just shift it down, just like that. So now we can start wiring up our series component, right? And we'll add a few more interactions right after that. So if I hop into prototype mode, we can dive into this series component. And the first thing we want to do is be able to navigate to the left and the right. So I'm going to click on this arrow over here to the left, this one right here. And again, because we're using keys and Gamepad, we don't really need to select a very specific object, just any object inside of the component. So I'm going to click on this arrow, and then I'm going to use my left thumbstick and go left, and we're going to navigate to our end of times state. And for this one, because it's a larger card, larger interaction, I'm going to bump this up to about 0.4 seconds. And if we take a look, that's not bad. It could work, right? And then we can go this one, and we can navigate to the right, and we're going to go to our Futura state. Now, one thing that's really cool is you're not limited to one interaction for, navigating left, navigating right. Some people may not have Gamepad controllers, right? So what you're able to do is with this same object selected, I can click on this plus button to add an additional interaction. So if you're sharing this on the web and you want someone to be able to interact with it, you can also use your keys. So in this case, I might want to use my left arrow key, and we're going to go to the same state. And this one over here, we're going to use the right arrow key and go to the Futura state. But it goes further than that, right? What if someone doesn't have access to a keyboard or a gamepad, or they're physically not able to use a keyboard or a gamepad? Well, we can click on this one more time, and we can add in a voice trigger. So here, I might want to say something like navigate left, and we're going to navigate to the end of time state. And we're going to do the same thing over here. Navigate right. And this command right here is what XD is going to listen out for when the spacebar is held down within the prototype. Futura, and that looks pretty good. So we have all of our interactions right up here. So if I can press play, we can go over here. Now I don't have this wired up to go back yet. So what we can do is hop on over to our end of time state. Click, and we're going to use keys and Gamepad. We're going to navigate to the right. Default state. We can also add in, there we go. And default state. And then finally, we can go over to our Futura state. Navigate to the left. Default state. And then we'll add one more with our key to the left and default state. Alex is saying, at some point, could you touch on the concept related to Z-index, component stacking order, and how it relates? Yes, definitely going to get there. I will get there in just a few minutes, probably. All right, so now press play, and using just the thumbstick on my controller, I can navigate to the various states. Now I'm noticing this state in here in particular is a little bit off. I didn't line it up properly, but that is okay, right? Now, one more thing we might want to do, and this sort of gets to what Alex is talking about, not yet, but it almost gets there, is we may want an interaction going from this state here to the expanded state. So back in prototype mode, I'm going to make sure to select basically any object, but I'll select this card here, click on that blue handle, and then we're going to assign, let's say, the A button on our controller, right? This one right here. And this is going to go to our expanded state. Maybe I'll slow this down a touch to about 0.6 seconds. And maybe I can also add in maybe the return key for those who don't have a gamepad and to the expanded state, right? So now we can go left, we can go right, and then we can use our A button to expand. And all those animations look absolutely beautiful. And we can go back to, let's say, our expanded state. And then at some point, we'll want a way to go back. So in this case, we might want to use the B button to go back to our default state, or we can even use our escape key to go back to our default state. So one more time, A to expand, B to go back, or return and escape, right? You can't see my keyboard or my gamepad, but those are the buttons that I am pressing. Now, one thing we also might want to do is inside of this expanded state, we may want some additional information that shows maybe the episode list that kind of pops up from the bottom as these categories move away. So what we're going to do is we're going to start creating that, and we can do that inside of our default state or our expanded state. I'm going to do it inside the default state just so that it pushes to our other states as well. And I'm going to start that process inside of our mask because I want that to appear, all of our episodes, I want that to appear inside of here. So what we're going to do is you can also design this outside, and then you can bring this into the component and it'll come in as an instance once you do convert that into a component. So let's go ahead and, just for now, I'm going to hide some of this information. And then right here, episodes. I'll make this a little bit larger. Right now it's at 24. Let's try 28 just to bump it up a touch. I'm going to drag out some guides just so I can make sure that everything is lining up really nicely. There we go. And right down here, we might want 3 episodes going across, for example. So I'm going to grab the rectangle, drag one out. Now I showed this tip a few times, but if you want to make sure that all of your shapes are going to line up really nicely, drag it out to about where it's going to end. And then inside of the properties inspector, you can use some very simple math, divide by 3, and then to give it a little bit of padding, let's say minus 16. And if you want to just get rid of those fractional pixels, just like that. So that way I can have 3 of these going across and it'll line up quite nicely, right? I think it was somewhere in this area here, right? There we go. Perfect. So that'll be one image there. And then below this, let me move this up. We might want some additional information about this episode. So I can drag this down, and this might be the title of episode. Maybe I'll drop this in size to about 24. There we go. All right. I also asked this on Behance, Instagram, and so I don't typically check direct messages on almost any platform. If you tweet at me publicly, and I'll definitely see that, but especially Instagram, I get some weird messages over there, so I don't even check that anymore. It's more of a personal platform. So you ask about icon packs. So if I go ahead and launch Nucleo, I do have some icon packs in here already. Specifically, the ones that I use are the Font Awesome packs, and Font Awesome 6 is currently in beta, which is coming out. And then I have the a few of these symbol icons, I think is the name of it. This one I don't think is the name of this particular icon pack, but if you do not have access to icons, what I would do is go into your plugins panel in XD and then go download the Icons for Design plugin. And if you want to look up something like Game, for example, right? You have all these amazing open source icons that you can grab, which is great. But yeah, Font Awesome is typically the one that I use. All right, so I've got the episode list, title of episode over here. I'm going to duplicate this over to the right. Now this one I want anchored to the right, so I'm actually going to right align it. And this is going to be, let's say 59 minutes. Just how long this episode is. This is definitely secondary or even tertiary information. So I'm going to drop this to about medium. Maybe I'll drop it in size a touch, possibly, right? And then we may want maybe a description of this episode. So I'm going to make sure to switch this over to auto height, drag this on out. Of course, if I had actual copy, I can drag that in, or I can copy and paste it, grab it from a Google Sheet, a lot of different ways to do that. And I'm going to drop the size of this quite a bit. Let's go to about 20, drop the weight a touch. Perfect. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, for these particular images here, if we are going to be using a repeat grid, we can just drag them all directly in, or you can hop over to Finder or Explorer, and let's grab some images. We have some great space images. Let's see. What do we have here? We have this one I can just drag in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all this information, group it, and this will be called episode. I'll duplicate 1 and I'll duplicate 2. I'll just make sure they all line up. And there's lots of ways to do this. You can put it into a stack, put it into a repeat grid. But the reason I'm doing this outside of a stack or repeat grid is that I'm going to be enlarging some of these. So a repeat grid is not going to help in that case, but you could use a repeat grid to quickly create these cards and then ungroup it if you want to. And let's go ahead and grab this image here maybe, and then this one. All right. So we now have all of our episodes looking pretty good. Now, at this point, what we want to do is, turn this into a component, because we also want to be able to navigate between these episodes. Now, what you're going to notice, and I touched on this earlier, is if I hit the plus button right over here, it's going to turn into a component, but it's going to turn it into an instance of the main component. And that's because it's nested inside of a larger component, which is the series component. Now, it's important to note that, because if you want to add interactions to this particular component, you'll want to edit the main component, right? So what you can do is you can right click and then edit main component, which is right there. And it's going to take you off and you can go ahead and start editing. Now, what you can do is also drag this onto this artboard just so you can see how things are going to look. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start creating a few of these states. So I'm going to go ahead and press the plus button and create a new state. And we'll call this episode 1. Now for here, very similar to these categories at the bottom, all we're going to do is we are going to grab this image, maybe make it a little bit larger. Maybe I'll make it larger in this direction. Maybe I'll add a bit of a border, just so we really know that it's in focus. Nothing too crazy. 3 pixels, that's it. And then we're going to go to episode 2. Grab the image, make it a little bit larger. And of course, if I want to make sure everything is perfectly aligned, drag some guides out. I was close. Add a border, 3 pixels, and then finally we can do episode 3. There's the border and 3 pixels. So we have our default state, episode 1, 2, and 3. And very similar to what we did with our categories at the bottom, we can now wire this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this first one, and because we're going to be on the expanded view, we want to go down to see the first episode. So I'm going to press the down arrow key, and we're going to go to episode 1. And then from episode 1, we want to go to the right to go to episode 2. And then from here, we can actually go in both directions. So this left to go to our episode 1, and then to the right to go to episode 3. And then finally, from here, we can go back to episode 2. We can also go back to episode 1 if we wanted to, right? There we go. And then maybe from episode 1, right, if you want to go back to the default state, you can actually go up, for example, and then go to our default state. There we go. So we've got our default state, episode 1, 2, and 3 all wired up. And because we made sure to edit the main component, if I delete it from here and dive into this particular component here, you're going to notice we also have those wires here as well. So we have that on our default state, and I'm going to make sure to move this down here. And then if we go to our expanded state of our series, right, we'll want to make sure to grab these episodes and shift them on up. Now, I did hide that title and information, so I'm going to make sure just to go ahead and bring that back. There we go. Perfect. Now, here's one question, right? When you're on this state here and you want to go to your episodes, what exactly is going to happen? In my mind, you would press down, and as you can see here, the animation kicks off, right? But you might want to bring all the episodes up a little bit. So in that case, what you can do, we may not do that today, but if I grab the episodes component, edit the main component, right? Let me just bring this back over here so we can see exactly what's going on. Right? If we go to episode 1, what we might want to happen is all of this might want to come up. So we can go in here, we can grab all this information, just move it on up a little bit. And then we can even add a bit of an overlay behind it all. Just something like this, and then maybe reduce the opacity. We can even add maybe a gradient, for example, as well. So we have our default state, episode 1, and then of course you would have to kind of move that over to episode 2, 3, 4, whatever you might have, right? Let's actually very quickly delete these, just so we can get this right. So we have default state, and then we tap on episode 1, and if we hide this, right, that's going to happen, right? I think it's a much nicer experience. So let's do this one more time. So new state, I'll just type out 2, bring this up a little bit, give it the border. And of course, this is why you have to think of these things beforehand, because sometimes you don't even think about experiences like this, right? But that is okay. Oops. Add that border again, go to 3, and then bring this down. No border there. No border. And I believe I also kept the border on episode. There we go. Yep, it's going to reduce that. There we go. Okay, so now this will give us a much nicer experience. And very quickly, let's wire this up one more time. We're going to go to the right and number 2. And from 2, we're going to go to 3 to the right, and then there we go. We can also go back. This will be our episode 1. I feel like it's a Star Wars prototype. This will go this way and go to episode 2. Now, these interactions are probably a little bit too slow. 0.6 seconds for a small interaction like this, probably not the best idea. So I'm going to just drop this to about 0.2. And I'll also want to do that on these ones as well. So this will be 0.2, this will be 0.2, and then finally from here, I can select both of these at the same time and 0.2. All right, so let's do this one more time. Let's delete that, series, default state, and play. So again, we can press the A button on our controller to expand that card, and then now we can use the down, the thumbstick, the left thumbstick to navigate down to bring these up, and then we can cycle between them just using the left and right thumbstick, right? And we can go up. I messed that one up, but that's okay, right? But that's looking pretty good. It is getting there. Now, some of you have asked, Alex, I believe in particular, have asked, what's the importance of the Z order? So in this case, we haven't run into that just yet, but you will definitely run into this, because what we have here is we have several components that have left thumbsticks and right thumbsticks, right? So how do we make sure that XC doesn't get confused? Because we do have here, if we press down, right, you're going to notice we press down, we want it to go to the sci-fi thrillers card down here at the bottom. But instead, the episodes kind of appeared, even though we're not inside of that expanded state. So there are a few things that we can help with that, right? Checking questions, looks good. So the first thing is XD is going to look at your components from bottom to top and trigger those like that. I don't know exactly why it's like that, but that's the way it is. Probably engineering wise, I don't understand any of that. So probably engineering wise, that's probably the best solution. So we have our categories here, right? It's actually above, if we take a look here, it's above our, where is it? It's above our, oh, wrong group. It's above our episodes. So the episodes is naturally going to kick off first. There are a few things we can do to help this. One, we can take the categories and we can actually move it behind this mask, right? So now if we press play and press down, it's going to kick that off, right? Because it's lowest in the layer stack. Someone's asking, can I use the icons from Adobe stock after buying them? Yeah, if you buy icons from Adobe stock, you can definitely use them in your projects. And as long as you license them, they do come with licenses that allow you to work with commercial use or use them for commercial use. All right, so that's one thing, right? Another thing you can do if you wanted that categories, or for whatever reason, if you needed that categories component above all the other ones inside of the layer stack. In this case, because the episodes, we don't have a need to trigger the episodes right now, what we can do is inside of this default state is actually find episodes and just remove the prototype, at least remove the one that goes down. So in this case, I just selected it down here and delete. So now, even though the categories component is above, so it should trigger next, Bruno's asking, please add pages on XD. Pages is in the works. Andrew Shorten did confirm that. I don't know time frame when that is going to be released, but it is in the works. It's a very large project, as you can imagine, especially when you're talking about design, prototype, share, all these different modes that XD has, in addition to components and all these crazy factors. Pages is a very large feature, but it's actively in the works. All right, so now, because that episodes component is not available, or at least that interaction to go down, then it defaults to the sci-fi thrillers one, right? And there we go. So now another thing you can do is, let's say, for example, you wanted a login experience, and I showed this off in my video. So let's go ahead and very quickly create a login experience. And I'm going to drag a box out. We'll set this to black. Maybe we'll drop the opacity only so that we can see some of the information below. And then we're gonna just add some users. Now here we can probably create a repeat grid to drag a few users out. Space this out a touch. Let's go for 40 pixels. Why not? And then if I go into my libraries, or of course you can do this in Explorer or Finder. Good old toy faces. Let's grab me, and then we'll just grab a few. You can also select many of them at once and just drag those in, just like that. Let me make sure to select 4 of them. Bam, there we go. All right, so we have our users in place, and now we want to create some interactions that allow us to cycle between them and then choose a user to actually log in. So what we're going to do here is, the process is going to be identical to what we've already been doing. In this case, I'm going to, actually, I can keep the repeat grid, because maybe we're not going to, actually, no, we're not going to keep the repeat grid. Let's go ahead and ungroup it, because I'm going to unlink the graphics, and then, oh, helps if there we go. And then ungroup the grid, perfect. Users, perfect, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the users into a component, just like we did before, and we're going to create our default state, we might want a user selected already. So I'm going to just go ahead and just set a border. We're not going to go through and resize things. We're just going to set borders, right? We'll do a border of 10. And then our new state, this will be, let's say, our pink user. No border here. White border, 10. And then we're going to do our orange. And this will, I think it was Alex, right? Yeah, Alex, this will directly answer your question if it hasn't been answered already. And then we're going to do red. And then 0. All right, so like we did before, a lot of this is repetition, but we're going to go into our prototype mode, and we're going to select this one, and we're going to go to the right using our Xbox controller. Now here, because there's really nothing to animate, we're actually going to just do a simple transition, and we're going to set the animation to none. And we can also go to the left to get to our red guy. And then from pink, we can go to orange. And then purple to the left, which would be our default state. We've got orange, we can go to pink. We can probably also go to the right to get to red. And then finally, from red, we can go to our default state, and also orange if we go to the left, right? All right, now I also might want this background inside of this component. So in this case, I'm actually going to, from the default state, I'm going to copy this, pop it in here. Should have done that in the first place, but that is okay. I edited the default state, so it did pop it in all the other ones, which is great. And then we also want to be able to select a user. So possibly, right, from our, let's say we're going to select the pink user, right? So from here, we're going to set up a trigger with the A button, and we're going to transition to a different state. Now we don't have that state created yet. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to press the plus button one more time, and this will be selected, let's say. And all we want to do now, because we want to hide this, right? We are going to, is it possible to add sound effects while navigating the app? So it's not at the moment, but I did raise that to the team, and it's something they're going to look into. But on tap triggers, you can definitely do it. I'll show you that in a second. But on Gamepad and keys, you cannot do it at the moment. So from here, selected, all I'm going to do now is just grab these and just drop the opacity. All right, so now from pink, right? And it was Noor that was asking, right? Yeah, so if I go ahead and select, let's say tap, I can set up an interaction going to selected, but I can also add in an audio playback action at the bottom. Not available at the moment for keys and Gamepad, but again, I did bring it up to the team, so hopefully they get to that at some point, but they have to slot it into the roadmap. All right, so I'm gonna use the A button to transition to our selected state. That looks great. And now we can go ahead and press play and go to the left or the right. What's happening, right? And this is exactly what Alex is talking about. Again, I don't understand the engineering side of things, so I'm sure there's a reason for this. But when XD is looking at what to transition or what to trigger first, it's looking in the layers panel at the component at the lowest, or the component lowest in the layer stack. Again, I don't understand the engineering side of things. So right now, because users is at the very top, it's not triggering. The one lowest with the left or the right thumbstick is triggering first. So the workaround for this, and it's not too difficult, the workaround for this is take the user's component, which we want to trigger first because it's going to be the first thing that we see. Move it to the back of the layer stack, right? As far back as you can possibly go. And then, because you can add 3D transforms to overall components, you can go ahead and turn 3D transforms on and simply set the Z index or the Z depth at 1, which will take that user's component and actually display it on top of everything else, even though it is at the very bottom of the layer stack. So now if I press play, I can use the left and right thumbstick, and it's going to trigger first because it is lowest. Again, I don't understand the engineering side. In my mind, it would be highest to lowest, but I'm sure there's a reason, right? And now I can go A to hide it, and now I can continue going through everything, right? So there we go. So it looks like there are some questions coming in. Let's take a quick look. I can add animation that depends on the other. For example, when I click on the keyboard, the elements change color and goes back to the... So Bruno, I don't believe that's possible just yet, unless all of those are inside of a larger component. But things like time triggers are in the works, and the team wants to get to things like conditional logic and things like that. So if you interact with one component, then it could trigger something else on another component. I don't believe that we're going to see that this year, but something the team wants to get to. But time triggers, we're definitely going to see this year. Have you used components inside another component in this project? Yes, I have. So this one here, the series components, let me go ahead and hide users. The series component actually has the categories component right here. It also has the episodes component. So if I play this, right, I can tap A, I can go down, and all of these, so this episodes component is a component nested inside the series component, which is this one right here. I also have this categories component right down here at the bottom, right? Now, I did probably mess this up a little bit because what I probably have to do is rearrange some of these and experiment with a few things, but yeah, there we go. All right, so one more thing we can do is we can start setting up a menu. So we have up here, we have this menu icon. Right now it is not a component, but what we can do is set up a very simple menu. So a lot of people are saying XD is getting smarter and smarter every day. It is, and I can't talk about everything that is in the works. I can say time triggers is in the works, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that we're going to be shipping in the months to come. And of course, Adobe Max is coming up in October, which is going to be free again this year. And Adobe Max, we always have some really exciting stuff. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's see. So what we're going to do is we're going to start creating our menu. So we have this menu icon, and when either it's tapped on or the menu button is used on your gamepad, it's going to slide something out. So we don't have too much time. We have 5 minutes. So we're going to create a very simple menu, right? We're going to create a container for our menu. And then behind it, I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to have a little bit of an overlay. Just like that. We're going to move this behind. And then in here, we may want some simple information, maybe a user profile. And let's go to our toy faces again. There we go. And underneath, we might want the person's name. Let's make sure to change that to a color we can all see. Let's go ahead and bold this a little bit. Maybe I'll just drop, size not too bad, but I'll drop it a little bit. There we go. And then down below, of course, you can add a lot more information, but down below, we might want some additional sections for this menu. So maybe we might want, let's say, Discover. And since we don't have too much time, I'm not going to worry too much about the icons, but just as placeholders, I will add in a little bit of an ellipse. There we go. And for this, we can go ahead and group this, and this will be called, let's say, link. And I'm going to put this into a larger group, and this will allow me to turn a stack on in the properties inspector. I'm going to set this to a vertical stack, and now I can just duplicate, 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 duplicate. Just have a bunch of links, right? Space them all out. And this one over here might be search and shows. And maybe settings, right? There we go. And then behind this, just so we know which one is active, I might want a very simple background. This will be behind the links. Maybe I'll just darken the color a little bit. Again, I'm rushing through this because we have 2 minutes left, but just to kind of give you an example of what a menu could look like. And very similar to what we did in the previous examples, we can grab all of this stuff, and maybe I'll also grab the menu icon. And I'll turn this into a component, which we can call menu. And then the default state, we actually want this information here, everything but the menu icon. We don't want the overlay as well. Just slide this in. And then the overlay, we might just want to drop the opacity to about 0. And then our new state, which is going to be called expanded. We're going to grab that same information, drag it on back, grab the overlay. Let's bump this up to about 90%. And now we have our default state, which basically nothing except the menu icon is shown. And we have our expanded state. So back in prototype mode, we can select that menu icon right there. And we are going to click on the handle. And in this case, we're going to use the menu icon or the menu button on the Gamepad, and we're going to use auto animate because there are things that will be animated, and this is going to go to expanded state. We'll do, let's say, ease in and out 0.4 seconds. And then from the expanded state, we can select any object, and we can use maybe B to go back, possibly. So now, menu, and then B. So all of this is all done on a single artboard. So let me go ahead and unhide this. So again, we can kind of cycle between our users. We can select one. We can check out all of the shows. A to expand, we can see all the episodes, right? I did mess that up a little bit, that's okay. Press the menu. And then you can also create additional states that cycle through many of these options. Don't have time, but check out my video on YouTube. You can see all of that in action. And of course, B to go back. So that is going to wrap it up for today. A big thank you to everyone who has tuned in. I definitely want to see all of the amazing work that you do using these new triggers. And again, time triggers is also in the works, so stay tuned for that. Big thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Stick around, Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few moments. That's it. I'm going to be back next week with another XD Masterclass. Let me know if you have any suggestions on Twitter, and I'm always looking for new things to create. So thank you everyone, and I will see you all next time.